I was a city person, always dreaming of escaping the daily hustle and bustle and living somewhere remote in a small town. After months of searching and negotiating with real estate agents, I found a property I wanted to make mine, to start a new life. With my son, it was a farming town in Kansas with a population of around 2,000 people. It was perfect. I bought the land, packed my things and my son's things in a Uhu haul, and we started the journey to our new home. Looking back, he was more excited than me, and I was also very excited. We were both going to get away from it all and start a new chapter in our lives. My son had just turned 9 years old. His new school was near the farm, and he didn't have many friends in the city, so I knew the move would be good for him. His mother, my wife, had passed away when he was very young, due to an illness like that I had to play the role of father and mother. I was a very happy child, always energetic and curious. Like his mom, the farm I bought was called Crow Rest. It was a couple of acres full of sweet corn that was already taller than me. Much of the harvest was ready, and I was excited to start our new business. When I saw the land on the internet, I thought it was perfect. It was not too big, but not small either. The 2-story house on the property looked in good condition, as if someone had remodeled it. Recently, the bank told me that the last owners suddenly abandoned it, so I was able to buy it at a good price. They said it is common for people to feel overwhelmed by the maintenance that a farm requires, but I felt I was prepared. After hours of driving across the United States, we finally arrived at our new home. It was around noon when we first arrived at Crow Rest, the way the fields and the house lit by natural light. It was beautiful. Grandma could barely contain herself in the passenger seat. As soon as I stopped the car, he was already opening the door, shouting and screaming with excitement. I was glad he liked seeing it happy. It was worth it all to me. I parked the car, and he was already in the field, running down the path, and marveling at everything. I also decided to explore the place, to see it in person. Something the photos didn't show was the number of crows on the property. It was overwhelming. I had been warned that the name of the farm was not just a nickname, that crows gathered here frequently, but there were twice as many as appeared in the photos. However, I didn't let that affect me. It was the least of our problems. I knew there would be some things that we would miss. "Dad, look at this," I heard Elia scream. Excited, I went over to see what I had found. It was a scarecrow. I approached Elia, who was very excited. The scarecrow was hanging from a tall wooden cross that stood over the cornfields. His arms were tied to his sides, as if he was nailed, and his hands held to the cross. I remember thinking he was creepy, to say the least, on our bright, happy new farm. This scarecrow was like a dark figure, and he didn't do his job well either. The crows sat on the cross and on his shoulders. As I looked at him closely, I noticed his eyes sewn shut and a mouth that protruded, with a tie around his neck to hold his potato sack head. His clothes were handmade with holes that protruded from an O. The clothing looked like that of a farmer, but the dark tones and the wear gave him a dirty and old look. He had a trench coat, black, worn and torn at the bottom, and black farmer boots that looked like they had seen better days. Lastly, he wore a dark sun hat. As a finishing touch, he looked out of place on the farm, but Eli already seemed to love it. "Can I name him? Daddy? Please. Please," he said. Excitedly, I didn't want to ruin his happiness. Even though I disliked that scarecrow, what did it matter? I thought, if he liked it, I would bear the discomfort, of course. Name it, whatever you want. Elia thought about it for a while. She looked at the farm, and at the crows, then at the scarecrow. Tobias, traitor to all humanity of the crows, exclaimed with so much innocence in her voice. Honestly, giving him a name like that made him less scary. Although in a strange way, Tobias then, I answered, put an arm on his shoulder and said, come on, let's unpack and see the new place. We headed back to the car as crows cawed all around us. The first 2 weeks were great. I began to adjust to life on the farm, got the necessary equipment and tools, did some work on the house and the barn, and even told Elia that soon we could pick out some animals. We went to the village and met several locals. Many had never even heard of Crow Rest, which surprised me, considering how close it was to the village. Yet everyone was enthusiastic about the corn I provided them. Everything was going well until things started to. Suddenly I was working in the back barn on the other side of the crops, away from the house, giving it a coat of paint that he urgently needed, when I heard Elia in the fields. He seemed to be talking to someone curious. I yelled out to him, "Who are you talking to?" "Friend." There was silence for a while. I got worried. So I put down the brushes and I walked to the path that crossed the field. "Elia," I said again, and he came out from the plants, looking at me as if I had done something wrong and was afraid of getting into trouble. Calmly, I tried to figure out what was going on. "What is going on, friend? Who are you talking to out here with the birds?" I joked, but he had a nervous expression. He was talking to Tobias. He answered, still uneasy. I didn't give it much importance, and I added in a light tone, "Oh yes, and what did he say to you? Tobias, is he perhaps ready for a change of clothes? His is already done, pretty ugly." I continued joking as I wiped some paint off my pants and started walking back to the barn. Tobias doesn't talk much. He just listens to me. He waved, so I waved back and asked him how he was. He replied. He waved back. I'm sure it was a movement from some crow, and he got confused. Even so, I didn't want him to think that the scarecrow could move. I don't think Tobias can move. "Dude, he's made of straw," I started to say, but Ella interrupted me. "Yes, he moves. Dad, I've seen him." I didn't know what she meant. Really react when you saw him move? Or did I miss something? I asked, accidentally arguing with my 9-year-old son about whether the scarecrow moved or not. Well, he waved to me, and at night he comes down from the cross. Sometimes I see him walk through the crops, and last night he was in front of our house. My heart stopped. What I had just said, the rest I could leave to his imagination. But if he had seen someone in front of our house, it was starting to alarm me. "Wait, you saw someone in front of our house last night, and you see people moving around in the fields. Why haven't you told me about this until now?" Ella seemed nervous, like she was in trouble for not mentioning it before. But this was worrying. I tried to be calm with him about it. "Hey, you're not in trouble. But things like this I need to know, dude. We can't have people running around our property. It's not safe." I tried to reassure him if someone was lurking around the farm during the night. I wanted to know. I was glad he had told me. Now that I could be more aware. It's not people. "Dad, it's Tobias again. He was trying to tell me it was the scarecrow. It was probably better that I thought that than it being a person. I didn't want to argue with him or scare him, so I let it go. For now. Well, let's finish for today, and let's prepare dinner." I put my arm around him, looking around our fields as we went back to the house. I looked at Tobias hanging before leaving the fields that night after dinner. I put Elia to bed and stayed up working for a while on my computer. I was still working from home, although now our fields worried me. So I considered reporting it to the local authorities in the morning to leave a record. It was probably some kids playing in our fields. Then I heard something outside. It was slow, heavy footsteps, just on the other side of the wall where I was sitting. I froze. There really was someone outside. What could I do? I still didn't have a gun, and to be honest, I didn't think I would need it. I slowly started to get up from the chair and walked quickly to the lamp to turn it off. I wanted the room to be as dark as possible, so I could look out the window and see what it was about without being seen. I kept hearing the dull, slow sound of footsteps, but I still couldn't see whatever was around there. I felt my heart beating hard, nervously waiting to find out what it was that was lurking around our property. I prayed. It was just an animal. Then I heard something very low. They were words. "You're not real. Follow my voice. It's just a story lost in the darkness. Just let me in. I'm here. Let me in." The sentences were choppy with long pauses between each one. The voice was raspy like a sibilant whisper. Now there was no doubt someone was there outside, walking freely around our property. Hearing those words just made me angry. I refused to allow someone to roam freely in our house. I finally gathered the courage. I grabbed a baseball bat I had on the floor below and walked over to the front door. I swung it open, and I ran to the side of the house that was in the fields, where I swore I heard the footsteps, but I saw nothing. The only thing that could be heard now was the wind and the soft rustling of the crops as they moved. I was very confused. I knew I had heard something. The night sky was clear, so I could see around. Although not enough to look for footprints or signs of someone, I didn't know what to think. Suddenly there began to be thuds, as if someone was throwing plates, pictures, and even chairs. I was inside my house. Whatever it was had managed to get in. I felt a lurch in my heart. How could I have been so careless? My God, Elia, I panicked. I ran quickly to the front of the house and entered through the main door. It looked like a wild bull had passed through our house. Everything was thrown and smashed on the floor. Broken glass covered the kitchen floor. I tried to move without stepping on the glass. Then I heard the harsh hissing voice again, but this time it screamed violently. It shouted phrases all over the house, along the path, through the field. I hear crows. Don't open your eyes. I passed through the kitchen, trying to get to the stairs as quickly as possible. Whatever it was, that thing was upstairs, causing havoc. I had to get to Elisha as soon as possible. As I went up, I kept hearing the screams of that thing, as if it were searching for something. The sentences were fragmented and no meaning, but each word rang with a terrifying weight. His voice was chilling, and I knew he couldn't be human after hearing him scream. When I got upstairs, I heard Elia's heartbreaking scream from her room. "Dad, help me. He's going to catch me." He said each word, loaded with terror. I threw myself down the hall. The walls were full of holes and claw marks, as if he was going to break his way through them. The door to his room was ripped off and hung against the wall. A loud crash like broken glass came from his room when I entered. I saw no one. I looked around frantically. The room was shattered, as if something had fought to catch him. I called desperately, "Elia, where are you?" I heard him scream again, and I noticed that the window was broken, as if something had gone through it. I ran over and looked out. There was glass on the ground, and then I saw it, something dragging my son towards the field while he continued screaming for me. I saw him disappear in the cornfield. Only the moving stems indicated where they were going. Without wasting time, I went down the stairs and ran to the field, following the screams of Elijah that echoed in the night. I heard his pleas full of fear. While that thing dragged him deeper into the cornfield, the crows flew over us cawing, as if they were his accomplices, watching me, helpless, while I ran between the tall stalks. Elijah's screams guided me, but I felt helpless. The tears began to spring forth. I lost his mother, and now I was about to lose my son. I promised him that I would protect him. His screams faded away, but I kept screaming, hoping that he would know that his father was near when I came out of the field. I saw the clearing between the crops. He was lying on the ground, hurt, but he seemed okay. I felt relief and ran to him once in my arms. I wouldn't let anything separate us. He was lying on his side and started to get up slowly. He looked at me terrified and crying and screamed, "Daddy, help me. Get me out of here, please." He stood up, shaking as tears ran down his face. "I'm here, friend. Everything is going to be okay. Now you're safe." I felt better as I approached him, ready to get him out of that hell. But just as I was about to reach him, some shadows, shaped like hands, emerged from the crops, holding him before I could touch. He was quickly dragged back to the cornfield. The nurse screamed in surprise as our eyes met, and he was dragged into the crop. The nurse did not grab my hand. I screamed as all traces of hope faded in front of my eyes. I ran behind of him, trying to reach him, but every attempt was in vain. Finally, the tall stems disappeared, leaving an empty circle in the field. The sky was dark, covered by the crows that turned in a whirl. And then I saw what was taking my son under the light of the moon. It was Tobias, the scarecrow. He was alive. He was right. I felt indescribable fear when I saw that thing. He leaned back as his chest opened, releasing shadows that looked like hands. They were at least 20, moving frantically and wrapping around Elijah, covering her mouth to silence her screams. Then that rustic and whistling voice was heard again. "Tobias cannot move. He is made of straw with tears on his face." Ella extended his hand towards me. The shadows in the shape of hands slowly surrounded him and dragged him towards the dark void of his chest. He disappeared little by little in that darkness until only his arm was left dangling, which was finally absorbed completely after consuming him. All the hands returned to the inside of the creature. His chest began to close, as if someone was stitching the wounds, and the figure leaned forward, hunched. I was paralyzed by fear as I watched him. Not a single muscle in my body could move. The only sound was the cawing of the crows flying in circles above us. The scarecrow moved slowly every 2 seconds, as if it was reactivated. Then he looked at me. His stitched face seemed to go through my soul that night. He said one last thing, "But it's just a scarecrow. Don't be afraid." There was a moment of calm, then it let out a heart-rending scream that echoed in the night sky, and all the crows scattered in different directions. I couldn't face that thing. It was like a nightmare come true. It invaded me, and I ran out towards the path that led to the house behind me. I heard it fall to the ground, but it quickly got up and began to chase me, crawling on all fours like an animal. I looked back, The hands of shadows had returned, moving frantically around its body like snakes, using them to grab the ground and advance faster towards me. Its rustic howl resonated as it chased me. I turned the corner where the barn was and ran towards the path that led to the front of the house and the truck. It seemed to me that it was playing with me, screaming from behind, as if he wanted me to feel the illusion of escaping before he caught me. Like when he took Elia, I kept running. When I got to the truck, I was thankful I had left a spare key. I got in, closed the doors, and started the engine. The headlights illuminated the road, but I saw nothing in front of me. With my heart beating at full speed and tears on my face, I backed up as fast as I could. It was then that he landed on the hood of the truck, smashing the windshield. The serpentine shadows surrounded the vehicle, and his face was centimeters from mine, only separated by the cracked glass. He seemed to look into my soul with his demonic eyes. He let out another scream, pulling on his sewn mouth, as if the seams were going to break. I put the gear forward and accelerated straight towards the cornfield. Stepping on the brakes, the creature was thrown out by the force and fell on the ground. I saw her writhe, and with a gaze fixed on me, she began to charge again towards the truck. I ran her over again, listening to her wild screams in the night. I put the reverse and I went over her again. Every time I did it, she screamed with a high-pitched screech. I screamed with frustration of rage, feeling that I was hurting her, as he had done to me. I repeated this movement over and over again. I just wanted to finish him off for having taken everything from me. Finally, I backed up enough so that the headlights illuminated his figure lying on the ground. I didn't want to leave, but after going over him so much, I knew I had to leave. I drove to the police station as quickly as I could to report everything that had happened when we returned to the place. The scarecrow was no longer there. Nobody believed what I said that night. How can I blame them, everything that happened? It seemed like a bad dream. They saw the state of the house and they asked me if there was any detail that I was missing. They even interrogated me and continued to investigate, believing that I had something to do with it. They themselves said that many things were inexplicable, but the case of my son's disappearance remains open. To this day, I still hear that rustic voice imitating my words in my head every night. I know what I saw and what took him away, and it is still out there.